let me ask you, yes, you, a question. What is modern Final Fantasy? With the emphasis on modern. Take a moment to think about it. I will wait. You might have given an answer something like this. Final Fantasy is a JRPG where you travel together with a band of characters that are inspired by anime-esque characters, most of the time in a fantasy world, yet sometimes in a sci-fi world, and the games used to have a turn-based system almost for 10 plus entries, yet now we have a action combat system and a open world. But for the newest mainline game there is not an open world anymore, but they also dropped the RPG mechanics, yet it has basically gone full-fledged action and basically has become a Devil May Cry rip-off, yet the remake games do have RPG mechanics in them and also do have a action combat. That is probably the answer that you might have given, I think. Now, I'm going to ask you guys a different question. What is Kingdom Hearts? Kingdom Hearts is a action JRPG game with Disney characters. Correct, little Timmy, and that was pretty fast. What is Dragon Quest? Dragon Quest is a turn-based JRPG with a Akira Toriyama art style. You see how the question of what is modern Final Fantasy is kind of difficult to answer right now. So we are kind of at a problem. Yes, Final Fantasy has a problem. A identity problem. Let's talk all about that in today's video. Welcome to a new video, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Licht and I am just a small little pesky slop YouTuber that does video essays in a very big sea of content creators. I would really appreciate it if you would maybe give this video a like, if you like it, of course. Or not, you can just be a douchebag if you don't want to. I don't mind at all. I'm today here with my co-host. I don't know where I'm going to edit him. Todd, where are you? Somewhere.
It just works.
Today we're going to talk about Final Fantasy, in particular modern Final Fantasy, because there is a big problem. The thing is, right now, the sales for a lot of modern Final Fantasy games have been pretty bad. So Final Fantasy 16 has sold over 3.5 million sales in the first 3 days, if I'm correct. And then it went on to sell another 1.5 million sales, almost at a 5 million sales target. But then Square kind of became quiet about the sales for 16, and later on they admitted that the sales weren't really that good in the long term. And the same goes for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that only sold 2 million copies since its launch on February 29th. And I'm going to tell you guys, that is a bit too low, especially for the budget that these games have. Square themselves say that, Final Fantasy 16 actually met expectations back then. Final Fantasy 16 has now launched on other platforms like PC and Xbox as well. But Square has been very quiet about other sales. And they are kind of being like, the tail end is not really that big for this game. And Final Fantasy VII Rebirth isn't doing any better, which I am very surprised by, because I am a absolutely big simp for VII Rebirth.
What's this? What's this?
Some fans of the channel might know this already. I absolutely love 7 Rebirth, and I will praise it towards the heavens and be a simp for it, and I will preach about the game as much as I can. And for some weird reason, people are not playing it, and that is not good. To be fair, it's the second game in a trilogy, and of course you need to have played the first game, so that's kind of already a problem. Both of these games have not been selling at all. Why is that? Well, I believe that it is because of the fact that Final Fantasy these days has an identity issue. It doesn't know what it wants to be. And a lot of older fans are just fans of the turn-based system. So you are basically annihilating your whole older audience by going in different ways. Ooh, what is happening right now? You guys might notice I have some different clothes on right now because this is like the 4th take that I have to film again because I was basically incorrect with my previous take. So now I have to just do it all over again because why not? What I really wanted to talk about in this part of the video is a little bit of the history of Final Fantasy, because it is pretty interesting to see where Final Fantasy is basically coming from the past, and where it is right now today. Final Fantasy started all the way back in the 1980s. Yes, if you've played Final Fantasy 1, you're basically a dinosaur. Final Fantasy was basically Square's last game before they would go bankrupt. They were in pretty big problems, and Final Fantasy 1 basically saved the company. And that is how Final Fantasy actually started. You get it? Final Fantasy, Last Fantasy.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now, Final Fantasy has always been a turn-based franchise, from Final Fantasy 1 all the way up until with Final Fantasy X. Now, Final Fantasy VII though did introduce the ATB system, but that really didn't change much at all. Still, at its heart, a turn-based game, right? And people loved it, especially 7. When 7 came out on the PlayStation 1, this was really when Final Fantasy hit a, shall I say, very big mainstream sales target. And I believe Final Fantasy OG sold 10 million plus copies. Now, for PlayStation 1, back then, that was wild. So the fact that something like a JRPG was capable of that, hitting those type of sales, that was excellent. And then Final Fantasy X came out around the middle point of the PlayStation 2 era, and this was kind of one of the last true turn-based Final Fantasy games, because after 10 a lot of things changed.
Welcome to the Avalon in Hollywood, California. I'm Elijah Wood, and MTV is here to bring you an exclusive look at the new Xbox.
We are now at the end of the PlayStation 2 era, and we are basically entering the Xbox 360 era and the PlayStation 3 era. And at this moment, the Xbox 360 already launched before the PlayStation 3, and at this point, shooters were starting to get very popular in the West. Something like your Call of Duty or your Gears of War, something like that. First-person shooters and third-person cover shooters. And from this point there were some shifts in the gaming titan industry. You also got the birth of Assassin's Creed, stuff like that. And the popularity of the JRPG was kind of declining at that point. So Square came around and they want to do something else. With 11, I don't know who the hell remembers 11. That's basically a MMO that they released. I don't know if it was actually available in the West at all. It could be a Japanese exclusive or something. I could be totally wrong about that. But Final Fantasy XII was the next big mainline single player game. But 12 was a bit different. 12 had a very different combat system. It had basically this auto-battling combat system, kind of like an MMO or something like a Xenoblade Chronicles, if you guys have ever played those JRPGs. Very good, by the way, I highly recommend them. But the landscape was a bit changing about the sentiment of JRPGs back then, and Square was basically going to bet on really the hardcore scene here. But some people were a bit upset with 12. Most people liked it though. It was still, of course, a shall I say, tactical RPG, and that was good. But it was just an auto-battler, so some people did not like it, but this game was mostly received very well with critics and also with the fandom. But there was starting to get a small divide here after Final Fantasy XII. Then we are getting to the black sheep of the family. No, Todd, not that one. Final Fantasy XIII.
Cheers!
So, Final Fantasy XIII is a bit special. It's basically part of a trilogy with... Hello guys and gals, a little intermission here. Editor's note, I'm about to say here that Lightning is the very first female protagonist in a Final Fantasy game, but that is of course not correct. That would be Tara Brandford according to Google. So yeah, sorry about that, I have a pretty small peanut brain. Enjoy the video. The very first female protagonist, Lightning, max my English, oh my lord. And Square really wanted to push visual fidelity for this Final Fantasy. That was basically their big slogan with Final Fantasy XIII. Much bigger fidelity, and it would make use of the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, you know, one of the very first HD era Final Fantasy games. And graphically, still upon this date, in my opinion, Final Fantasy XIII still looks very good. But Final Fantasy XIII released, and the reception was not that great. Now, I don't really personally know this because I actually never played 13. I do actually own 13 and I just really want to play it out of curiosity on how bad it is. But a lot of people did not like the story. They didn't like the lore. So one sacrifice really had to be made with Final Fantasy 13, and that is in the gameplay with its level design. The game was very linear. Final Fantasy 13 is also called a corridor game. At least that's what's being claimed online. And the quality bar of the game was really going down. Max, is the combat system still turn-based, or is it the same as 12 with its auto-battler system? No, they changed it all up again. And I have to quickly Google this because I don't know what the hell the name is of this combat system at all. Command Synergy Battle. CSB.
What?
Whatever the hell that's supposed to be, Square. So you have this basically very convoluted combat system with a very linear world and a story that just wasn't that good and characters that weren't that well written, and the quality bar for Final Fantasy was going down in a nosedive. Now, Final Fantasy was actually not the only Japanese franchise at the time that had this problem. Capcom also had some problems with Resident Evil, namely 5 and 6, going slowly down in quality over the years. And we all know now how Capcom has basically rebooted themselves with Resident Evil 7, and Square is kind of also doing the same with Final Fantasy, especially since 7 Rebirth and 7 Remake in my opinion. Okay, 13 released and it was just not really a good game. But Square did not want to give up. They made a sequel, 13-2, as well as Lightning Returns. And yeah, it wasn't received that well either. And because of this trilogy approach that they were doing, the sales got worse and worse over time. Now, of course, because it's a trilogy, you have to play each game for every, of course, storyline to follow. That was, of course, first of all, intimidating. That was one big problem. And yeah, Square, I don't know if they actually noticed that back then. What are those? I realized pretty late in the recording that I am actually wearing green socks on a green screen. Yeah, not very smart of me, I know. Final Fantasy XIII wasn't really the success Square Enix was hoping for. So what did they do to counteract the criticisms that they got with Final Fantasy XIII? Well, let's make an open world Final Fantasy game.
That mountain is not just a backdrop. You can walk all the way to the top of that mountain.
And not just that, let's do an action combat system while we're at it. So this was around the time that open world games were starting to get very popular. In the early beginning of the PlayStation 4 era, shall I say, it's after Skyrim and Witcher 3 that open world games were getting a lot of mainstream attention, or something like GTA 5. And at the time, there was another Final Fantasy game in development, and very famously never going to release, at least in its original state. Final Fantasy Versus 13. Now, I could make a whole video on Final Fantasy Versus 13 alone. It was basically a spin-off game from 13, hence the title 13, of course, Versus 13. It was going to get spearheaded by my most favorite video game developer of all time, Tetsuya Nomura.
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wings.
This time, I'll fight. I came here because I wanted to help. Let me keep you safe.
Tot. I didn't mean that. I mean second most favorite developer of all time. Did I say favorite? No, you are my favorite, man. Normally, you might know him as being the director for Kingdom Hearts. Some people love him a lot, like me. And Nomura has a knack for very convoluted storytelling.
Mobile phone game. Time travel. Data world. Darkness.
Now, I personally really love that as a Kingdom Hearts fanboy, but understandably a lot of people don't. But sometimes this guy also just gets enough hate, and sometimes also not deserved hate online. People are blaming him for 7 Remake, even though that has been proven multiple times to be false in various interviews. He actually wanted to keep the remake as close as possible towards the original story. And people like Kitase wanted to change stuff up for the remake. But that's a whole nother topic, not for today's video. So, he was developing Final Fantasy Versus 13 for a very long time. And there are some old trailers that I will probably put on the screen for you guys as B-roll footage. And you see Noctis, the main character, and oh my god, this guy was so cool, especially in those early trailers. This is all fully designed by Nomura, and Nomura, first and foremost, is a character designer. And he's absolutely goated at that. He designed designs for Final Fantasy VII and other Final Fantasy games, as well, of course, as Kingdom Hearts or The World Ends With You. He is an amazing character artist. But as we all know, the development of Versus 13 was a bit bad, shall I say. It was in development hell for a very long time. And Square Enix at some point just yeeted off Tetsuya Nomura from the project to give it to a new guy named Tabata. And he would basically fix all the stuff that was there left from Nomura to make a new project, which would become, as we all know, Final Fantasy 15. And the game was re-revealed in, I believe, 2013 together with Kingdom Hearts 3, and Kingdom Hearts 3 would then be spearheaded again by Nomura. But the character designs are still there from Nomura, how Noctis was designed, stuff like that, as well as the gang. I don't remember the names anymore. Prompto or Spromp. The blonde guy, the buffed guy, and the guy with the glasses, basically. I don't remember the names anymore. Tabata was basically there to basically fix kind of a broken project here and make something good out of it. And in my opinion, he did that once Final Fantasy 15 launched, I believe all the way back in 2016. This was actually my own very first Final Fantasy title. And then after that I played the remaster for 10. And 15 is actually my very first Final Fantasy game. I saw the trailers of it being open world and being an action game. And that spoke actually to me as a new Final Fantasy fan a lot. So I checked this game out, and a lot of people like Final Fantasy 15, maybe a bit more than 13. But it was still with a lot of problems, especially with its story. It was unfinished, and a lot of the stuff you see in the trailers for it was basically cut. Characters were cut, story beats were cut, and they did fix a lot in the DLC afterwards. Square also wanted to do this whole movie universe thing that would tie in together with Final Fantasy 15. They released a movie which is basically a prequel to Final Fantasy 15. Square Enix was actually kind of in front with that whole cross-media thing, and now it's very popular with the Fallout TV show, of course, as well as Cyberpunk Edgerunners. But the sales are actually very good for Final Fantasy 15, with almost 10 million sales for that game, which is actually good. So the sales were going back up from Final Fantasy 13's Disaster Trilogy. Now there might be a few reasons why Final Fantasy 15 sold so well. One reason is, of course, the promise of an open world, and of course there was a lot of hype towards this game because of Versus 13 and how that development was basically going, and maybe people still thought that Nomura in some ways was involved with the project, which wasn't the case at all. But the sales for 15 were good. So Square was seeing that, and they saw, action combat system might be a good thing. But some people online were complaining about the fact that there was no turn-based combat system anymore. And of course a lot of these people were older fans of older Final Fantasy games. So at this time, Square was basically making a whole new audience. A fully different audience from what we used to have in Final Fantasy early days from 1 to 10. And I'm pretty much an example of this. I am a brand new Final Fantasy fan, and 15 was my very first Final Fantasy game. Also, this might have to do with the fact that gaming in general has become much more popular in the PlayStation 4 era, especially. A lot of PlayStation 4s has been sold, and gaming has just been bigger and bigger than ever, and so Final Fantasy was also getting new fans. Now, the combat system still had tactics, shall I say, so it's still an RPG, but as we all know, 16 proved to be even more divisive. So Final Fantasy 16 released, and not that long ago. It was one of the early PlayStation 5 games, and now it's basically a full-fledged action game. And a lot of people like it, I also like it myself, but there are a lot of people that don't like it. I do think they went a bit too far by removing the RPG mechanics. Final Fantasy 16 especially is just not an RPG at all. Final Fantasy 16 has a basically Devil May Cry-esque combat system, and that is very explainable because the guy that made the Devil May Cry combat system was hired by Square Enix to do the combat system in 16. That's why 16 is really playing like a Devil May Cry game. Now, I really love Devil May Cry and Bayonetta and God of War, like these action games, so I had a lot of fun with 16, but understandably, a lot of people didn't. Now, of course, we also have the remake series for 7, and that is also a action-based combat system, but at least those games have RPG mechanics still in them. There is a pause feature that you can use ATB attacks, and there is actually strategy going on against different enemies, that you can use different weapons, you can switch party members, and that still feels like an RPG. 16 doesn't even let you switch any party members, and that is also a staple a lot of Final Fantasy fans just expect. It has always been a party-based game with different party members that you can control, albeit in turn-based or in an action system. Kind of weird that that wasn't in the game.
Careful now. That which lies ahead does not yet exist. Our world will become a part of it one day, but I will not end.
Now, the ultimate question really is, was an action combat system the right move in the end here? And I just can't really blame Square Enix, in my opinion. They saw their sales declining, and let's be honest, the JRPG was not as popular back in the Xbox 360 era and the PlayStation 3 era. That was just a fact. So if I would have been in Square's shoes, I would have probably made the same decisions to make a more action-based Final Fantasy game, or a Final Fantasy game with higher graphics and higher budget, to make it like a blockbuster type of game. So I can't really blame Square here. But something very interesting has been happening over the past few days, weeks. You might have noticed it yourself. A lot of people really like Clair Obscur. If you guys don't know what Clair Obscur is, it's basically a JRPG made by a Western development studio named Sandfall Interactive. These guys are basically ex-Ubisoft employees, and they made one of the best games this year. And all of a sudden now, a lot of people love traditional turn-based combat, but also that traditional JRPG style. And to be fair, this has been growing in popularity not just because of Clair Obscur, but also the Persona franchise. Persona 5 was a very big example of this resurgence. Look at the sales of Persona 5. Persona was an absolutely niche game, let's be honest. With 3 and 4, they were popular in the JRPG sphere, but not really mainstream. Up until Persona 5 released. What do these games do very well? Both Persona 5 and Clair Obscur. They reinvent the turn-based system. Persona 5 has that baton pass system, and Clair Obscur has that dodge, souls-like parrying thing going on. it's not just a normal turn-based system a la Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy X. They tried to evolve that original turn-based formula into something new. And that is what these games do very well. There are people that only love action RPGs that are trying out Persona 5 and Clair Obscur. And maybe some of them won't like it, but at least they are trying it out and they are buying these games. And that is very important. And I have the feeling that a lot of people aren't even willing to look towards the new Final Fantasy games because they expect things and know things. And they might be like, I am not really into these JRPGs at all. I know what Final Fantasy is by now. But for some reason they are trying out Persona 5. They are trying out Clair Obscur. Is it because they are new IPs to them? Maybe. Or maybe because the gameplay is a bit more hardcore with RPG mechanics. That could also be the case. But both of these games have been really bringing back that traditional JRPG turn-based combat, and not just that, they are making it popular again, mainstream.
I feel like Clair was a game that wasn't on that many people's radar at the beginning of the year. People knew it was going to be cool. I kind of thought it might be cool, and now it's like a lot of people's Game of the Year contender. Ben, what do you think?
Yes, a good game, isn't it?
It's good.
I feel like this is a game that is tailor-made for me. I'm a huge RPG fan, and as a person who's been playing these types of games since I was about 8 years old, it's kind of the game that we felt like we played when we were 9 years old, 8 years old, that first time that we ever explored RPGs.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that it's not only nostalgic, but it feels fresh and new, and it's the fact that it's bringing a lot of people who wouldn't normally play this type of game into it, and it's been a real treat to see.
Now, I hope you guys see the problem a bit more clearly. Square has basically created two fan bases. Now, is Square going to cater to both of these audiences? I don't think that's a good idea, especially for the budget of these games and how expensive they are, at least for the mainline games. So, what should Square do? They should pick one of the two, or go back to turn-based and then evolve to make it new and fresh again, just like Clair Obscur and Persona. Or stick now with the action combat, evolve that to make it closer to what Final Fantasy originally was. And in my opinion, they already did that with 7 Rebirth, but that's my opinion. So, pick one, Square. You will have to choose something. You need to have an identity. You can't just flip-flop between the two, because it will annihilate your own audience and there won't be any growth. Yes, you might annihilate one audience by sticking with one, but that's better than this flip-flopping and not knowing what to expect for the next game. Now, how can they solve this? Let's say, okay, Final Fantasy XVII will be going back towards traditional turn-based, but let's make a spin-off that will do the action combat system just like Final Fantasy XVI as an example, and name that Final Fantasy War blah 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 Battle of blah 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 series, right? Now, if you're going to go with the action route, I do highly recommend that you stick with the Final Fantasy VII's approach, because Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, yes, they are action combat systems, they still have tactics to them, and they still have party member switching and all that stuff. Effectiveness towards enemies and weaknesses, stuff like that. That is what a JRPG is and needs. I think we can all agree on that in the Final Fantasy fan base. So yeah, will Square fix their identity issue with Final Fantasy? We shall see in the future. What is your opinion on this whole subject? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you guys for watching this video. It took me a long time to make this one. I had to do a lot of reshoots and a lot of re-editing. So I would really appreciate it, guys, if you would maybe like this video. If you liked it, of course. I also make other video game essay videos and review videos as well. Check them out on my channel, maybe in the description down below. I'm recently, not really recently, but I made a big essay video on RGG Studio if you are interested in that. Thank you guys for watching as always, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next video. I love you all, and especially Tifa. Bye bye. No, seriously, when is Square going to release the Tifa body pillow, Todd? I really want to know. Is the camera still recording? You didn't see anything, okay? Now, scram, get away, go.